we are starting with Sebastian from Taylor Wessing. And Sebastian, please come on stage and tell us what you're doing on the Prewave Action Platform.
Hi. Hello. Okay. I'm relieved. I thought that Prewave doesn't want me to speak. Okay, so I try to make it short. Other direction. So who's Taylor Wessing? We are basically a global law firm with more than 1,100 lawyers, 29 offices in 17 countries, and we offer full service with a focus on several business sectors. One of these is ESG, of course, and the, well, let's say currently most interesting, most important aspect with ESG, especially in this context today, is supply chain legislation. And that's also my field of expertise. So what do we do in supply chain legislation consultations? We basically help companies to implement the Supply Chain Act throughout the whole project, meaning we would start with something like reviewing whether the company and which entities of the companies actually fall under the Supply Chain Act. Then we do things like a gap analysis where we would take a closer look at the status quo of the company, which processes, which documents are already in place, where are the gaps, and how can you close the gaps to comply with the Supply Chain Act. We also support during risk analysis and in the preparation of preventive and remedial measures, which is basically a lot of documents you need to comply with the Act and processes you need to establish. And this goes on through the whole project and ends here with the report you need to file. And that's also something we can take a closer look at, review it from a legal perspective, whether you need anything to add there from a strategy perspective. And yeah, that should just give you a short overview of our services throughout the implementation projects. So how do we work together with Prewave? So Harald and I met about 2 years ago. Today it's actually the first time in person. Did a lot of webinars together. That's how it basically started. We just thought, okay, it makes sense to combine the expertise of Prewave and Taylor Wessing and do webinars on the new German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act. And then after a while, we thought, well, it makes sense to provide Prewave with a legal opinion on how Prewave supports companies in implementing the Supply Chain Act and in particular in performing the risk analysis. After that, we worked on sample texts for the draft report that you can find in Prewave. And that's something we just did. I just now want to show you some things we already did and are planning to do in the near future. So one thing is basically, Harald mentioned them already, questionnaires for risk analysis in your own business sector. Why should you do that? Because risk analysis in your own business sector has to be conducted in greater depth. So at the beginning, when the law entered into force, a lot of companies that didn't really think about the risk analysis in their own business sector, but focused, and I mean that's right to focus on that, on the suppliers. But when you look at what the authorities have published so far, you can see that they want companies to take the risk analysis in their own business sector serious as well and work with coordinators, with questionnaires and so on. That's why we developed at Taylor Wessing these questionnaires and also implemented them into the Prewave system. What else? So right now we are working on an e-learning for the German Supply Chain Act, something similar as what you know from anti-money laundering e-learnings, where you can actively click through the e-learning, learn about the law, and in the end you need to pass a test. So that's something we wanted to start with, focusing on your own employees, with the first part, more general part for your employees that are not affected very deeply of the Supply Chain Act, and then a second part that is basically focusing on the procurement department, which is most likely to be affected of the Supply Chain Act, and therefore needs more information, deeper knowledge on what they need to consider when they procure products or services. And why is that important? Because it's basically said so in the law. The German Supply Chain Act says that you need to perform trainings of your own employees, in particular in the relevant departments. And last but not least, Harald mentioned it as well, we are also offering consulting packages which can be agreed upon very individually. It could be like a consulting day at your company on a specific topic, workshops, or whatever you have in mind. But just one example here, one idea was that we could do a sanity check of your report, not a full-fledged check of your report, but basically maybe a check on one day to see which are the major gaps, where you need to do adjustments, or where you could add something from a strategy perspective. And that's it.